PCR machine didn't alarm. It hesitated. A chemical result sat just below the rejection threshold, not high enough to fail, not low enough to forget. In October 2012, inside a U.S. Food and Drug Administration laboratory, that hesitation stalled a decision no one wanted to make. The sample wasn't warm. It wasn't decomposing. It wasn't raw in the way inspectors usually fear. It was frozen tuna, imported, certified, labeled for sushi use. At the same time, emergency rooms across the United States were seeing patients with symptoms that didn't fit food poisoning. Faces flushed, skin burning, hearts racing minutes after eating sushi. Doctors treated it like an allergy. Antihistamines helped, epinephrine sometimes did. Routine cultures came back clean. No salmonella, no Vibrio, no parasite to blame. For days, the cases sat in isolation. Hospital reports didn't trigger food alerts. Poison control logs didn't point to a product. The reactions passed quickly, leaving little behind, except confusion. By the time epidemiologists at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention overlaid the data, the scale was impossible to ignore. 425 reported illnesses across multiple states, linked not to a single restaurant, not to a city, but to one frozen product moving quietly through the system. The processor was Moon Marine USA, based in California. The product was frozen raw yellowfin tuna. The year was 2012. This wasn't rot. It was chemistry. The first investigative exhibit wasn't the fish itself. It was the shipping records. Containers from Indonesia and Vietnam showed compliant temperatures from port to distributor. Minus 18 degrees Celsius, end to end. Cold enough to stop bacteria, cold enough to satisfy inspections. On paper, the cold chain held. The second exhibit came from toxicology. Histamine forms naturally in certain fish species, tuna, mahi-mahi, mackerel, when temperatures rise above roughly 4 degrees Celsius. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes only hours. Once formed, histamine cannot be destroyed. Freezing doesn't remove it. Cooking doesn't neutralize it. Histamine survives the entire system. Investigators rebuilt the pathway step by step. The tuna was caught in tropical waters. During early handling, before freezing, temperature control failed. Ice coverage was inconsistent. Fish sat too long on deck. Internal temperatures drifted. That's where the chemistry happened. Then came alteration. The tuna was treated with carbon monoxide, a legal process used to preserve bright red color. The flesh stayed vibrant. The smell stayed neutral. Visual spoilage disappeared. Documentation followed. Export certificates cleared. Histamine testing was performed, but on composite samples. Multiple fish blended into a single result. Here's the math the system depends on. One fish at 200 parts per million disappears inside a batch that averages under 50. The paperwork says compliant. The chemistry does not. Distribution moved fast. Frozen blocks crossed borders. Cold storage held. Sushi chefs thawed portions just hours before service. No regulation required retesting after thaw. Detection failed because the hazard didn't behave the way the system expected. The freezer, the safeguard everyone trusted, was irrelevant. The third exhibit appeared only after diners collapsed in restaurants. FDA investigators pulled retained samples from distributors and sushi bars. Some tested above 50 parts per million histamine. Others exceeded 200, enough to trigger violent reactions within minutes. By then, 425 people had already been exposed. In November 2012, a regulatory action followed. Moon Marine USA issued a nationwide recall. The FDA suspended the company's registration. Federal prosecutors later secured convictions for introducing adulterated food into interstate commerce. But the most unsettling discovery wasn't criminal intent. It was assumption. An FDA field investigator later described standing inside a freezer stacked floor to ceiling with boxes stamped sushi-grade. Stainless steel walls, cold air humming. Everything looked controlled. That's when it clicked. Sushi-grade has no legal definition in the United States. Consumers trusted it. Restaurants priced menus around it. Inspectors saw frozen fish and moved on. Everyone relied on a signal that wasn't tied to enforcement. This wasn't an isolated failure. FDA import alerts had flagged histamine violations in tuna shipments years before 2012. Containers rejected at ports, lots destroyed, warnings issued. The pattern existed, but it lived in separate databases, separate offices, separate moments that never aligned in time. Raw fish isn't most dangerous when it smells bad. It's most dangerous when it looks perfect. Histamine doesn't announce itself. It doesn't cloud eyes or soften flesh. It hides behind cold, color, and compliance. After the outbreak, surveillance increased. Import scrutiny tightened. Sampling guidance expanded. But the structure remained largely unchanged. Testing stayed probabilistic. Early temperature abuse remained nearly impossible to prove once fish crossed borders. Sushi didn't disappear. Menus didn't change. The system absorbed the shock and kept moving. And that's the real danger. Not that raw fish can make people sick, but that a global safety system built on cold, labels, and averages can carry a chemical hazard across oceans undetected until bodies reveal what data never flagged.